Pre-Algebra Lesson 6-6, Proportions and Percents. To solve problems involving parts of numbers, it's helpful to set up proportions. The proportion is n over 100 equals part over whole. The easiest way to know which one is the part and which one is the whole is it normally follows is your part, or whatever follows the word is usually your part, whatever follows the word of is usually your whole, and your percentage is usually n, and n is the percentage is always written over 100. So is over of equals n over 100, or part over whole equals n over 100. So to set up a proportion to solve problems, we just need to make sure that we can determine which part goes on top and which part goes on bottom. So it says find 23% of 158. Well, remember, you're doing is over of equals percent over 100, or others, and we normally put in this as n. So what do we have? We have the 23%, so that goes over here, 23 over 100. We have the word of, which is the 158, that's down here. So obviously, this is going to be your variable. The is part is going to be your variable. You could put in any letter you would like for is. I tend to put in x, because it's just simple and easy. So we have x over 158 equals 23 over 100. Now all we have to do is cross multiply because it is a proportion. And we've been doing proportions for quite some time now. And I told you proportions are a very, very handy way of solving very many mathematical problems. So if I was to cross multiply here, I would get 100x equals 23 times 158. So I'll put in my calculator 23 times 158, and I'll get 3,634. So 100x equals 3,634. To get x by itself, you divide by 100. And in this case, x equals 36.34. Simply done. Okay. Not hard. If you can set up the proportion, you're 90% of the way there because you already know how to solve a proportion. Look at problem number 2. What percent of 34 is 28? Well, if you were looking at part and whole, 34 is the whole because it's 10, not just because it's bigger, because it says what percent of 34, of this big number, is this smaller number 28? 28 follows the is, 34 follows the of, and then we're going to look for our percentage, x over 100. So 28 over 34 equals x over 100. So if we cross multiply, 34x equals 2800, because 28 times 100 is 2800. Divide by 34. 2800 divided by 34 is not a whole number, is it? Okay, so if in this particular case, okay, it says round to the nearest 10 if necessary. It's necessary. It's only necessary if you get a decimal that does not terminate. If the decimal terminates, you don't have to round it unless it says to round. If it says round to the nearest 10th, that means round every number to the nearest 10th. If it says round to the nearest 10th if necessary, that means if your number does not end up to be a terminating decimal, a whole number or a terminating decimal, then you must round it. X in this case ends up to be 82.3529, and it keeps going. So x would be equal to the nearest 10th, here's my 10th position, 82.4, because the number after the 10th is a 5, so we would round 3 up. So what percent? Oh, and it says percent, so we have to add our percent sign. Always double check to see if they're asking for a percent or a number to make sure that you get the entire problem correct. It would be sad to lose partial credit for not having a percent sign. Let's look at a couple more examples. 124 is 25% of what number? Okay. Of what number means that's going to be on the bottom. So 124 is going to go on the top. Of what number is going to go on the bottom? It's equal to my percent, which is 25 over 100. So I have 124 over x equals 25 over 100. If I cross multiply, 25x equals 12,400. If I want to get x by itself, I have to divide by 25. If I take 12,400 and I divide it by 25, I get 496. No need to round this number because it's not necessary to round it. And you don't need to add a percent sign because they didn't ask me if it was a percent. Number 4, 207 I should say, is 46% of what number? Right? Of what number again tells us to believe that that's on the bottom. 207 is on the top. Is equal to percent, which is 46, over 100. Tell us the percent over 100 equals is over of. Right? Or part over whole. 207 is the part of what number means, because if 207 is not over 100%, you know that's the part. Okay. If we look at this, we're going to cross multiply. 46x equals 20,700. Divide by 46. 20,700 divided by 46 is 450. Now, you can look at this problem and see, does this problem make sense? 207 is 46% of what number? 207 is close to 50%. It's close to half. If I took 207 and I doubled it, I would have 414. But it's not quite half. It's only 46%, so my number should be slightly bigger than 414. 450 is slightly bigger than 414, so that makes sense. It seems like it's a reasonable answer. You should look at your problems, and you should see, does my answer seem to make sense? Right? And in this case, it certainly does. 43% of 230 is what number? Okay, so is what number is over of equals percent over 100. So x, which is your is, over of, which is 230, equals my percent, which is 43, over 100. Simply cross multiply again. I will have 100x is going to equal 230 times 43, which is 9,890. Remember, it's very handy to have a calculator. Makes your multiplication much faster. Divide by 100. Now I can divide by 100 without needing a calculator. Just move my decimal point 2 places to the left. So x is going to equal 98.9. 43%. Right? Makes reasonable sense. It's less than half. Less than half of 230 is definitely less than 115, and 98.9 is less than 115, so we're good. Let's look at problem number 6. What percent of 250 is 138? What percent? That means that's going to be what we're looking for. 138 is your that's your part. 250 is your whole. Equals what my percent is, I don't know, n, x, p, q, whatever variable you choose to use, over 100. So I'll have 250 times x is 250x. 138 times 100 is 13,800. Divide by 250. 13,800 divided by 250 is 55.2. And it did ask for a percentage, so we'll add our percent sign. 138 is slightly over twice 250, because half of 250 is 1.5. So that seems like a reasonable answer. 55.2% seems reasonable. Now, if I would have gotten 87%, I would have known, no, wait, something's not right here. If you pay attention to looking at your problems. Always look at your problems to make sure they actually make reasonable sense.